Welcome to episode 2 of Cortadito con Cristyne. I'm Cristyne, and I will be your host for today's episode. So in our last episode, we talked a little bit about the history of Cuban coffee, how it migrated here, and the traditional Cuban breakfast. In this episode, we'll go a little bit more in depth into how to make this Cuban coffee that we speak of at home, and we'll get some insight from someone with a lot more experience and knowledge on coffee than me. So that leads me to my special guest. I have one of my favorite coffee connoisseurs on the show today. She is one of my bestest friends in the world and the coolest person I know. Let me introduce you all to Chanel. Chanel, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Cristyne. Thank you. How are you?
I am good. Disclaimer, we are very giggly people, so if we're giggling throughout this podcast, I hope it brings you joy and does not distress you in any way. So, Chanel is from an Italian upbringing. Her family has similar coffee traditions as mine, and we both drank coffee at a young age, or at least we weren't restricted to coffee at a young age at all. But Chanel also previously worked at Starbucks for 7 years, which is why I wanted her to be on the show, because she can give me a little bit more insight on her professional experience with making coffee. So Chanel, tell me more about your upbringing and what coffee drinking was like in your Italian-American household. And if you guys didn't know, this might be a bias comment, but I feel like Italians and Cubans are very similar in terms of culture, and you know, we have the same kind of stereotypes of being loud and family oriented and Catholic as well. So we have those similarities, and also some of our food is very similar. So I always say we're the same but different fonts, but the same word. But Chanel, so can you tell me more about your upbringing and what coffee drinking was like in your Italian-American household?
My parents always drank black coffee. They never did espresso. They were not, I guess, espresso people. They just didn't do it. But they always used a coffee maker. So for the coffee pot, they always used cold water at first and poured it in the coffee maker. And with a coffee maker, it gets the coffee really, really hot. My mom likes it that way. My dad likes it that way because the coffee is so strong. Like in Starbucks, we're taught that it needs to be really, really hot coffee going through that grounds to make it taste good, have the flavor come out, basically.
What does the cold water, does that do anything?
So you and I actually just looked this up because I didn't know the answer. Because my parents just told me that it tastes better with cold water. But the scientific reason is cold water has more oxygen and minerals in it than warm water. You notice that if you ever drunk warm tap water, and it tastes flat or a little off. So the best tasting coffee, tea, or other water-based drinks always starts with cold water.
That's really interesting because my Cuban family, we would never drink black coffee. It was always milk with espresso. And I drank mine. I started drinking coffee, well, basically milk with some espresso in it when I was like 4 to 5 years old, basically, like super young. We would just be exposed to that. And I had it with Cuban bread. And like a biscotti, like little lady finger, the sugary cookies. I would eat it with that. Do you have like an experience drinking it young? And also, what brand of coffee did your family use?
The brand of coffee my parents used, Gloria Jean's and Barney's, which is still around to this day. And we actually drank some this afternoon. I brewed some Barney's. I think it was Santa's White Christmas because we like flavored coffee. Parents like flavored coffee too, so always Barney's and Gloria Jean's. They've like stood the test of time, basically. Very consistent with the flavor. Still going strong.
I can attest to that. They were delicious. We had a hazelnutty one, but I love my hazelnut coffee.
Yeah.
I love a good chocolatey flavor to it. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And you really didn't start drinking till you were 18, right?
Yes. Yeah, no, I didn't drink until 18. I didn't feel the need. I always had like so much energy in the morning when I was younger. And then when I turned like 18, it was like a switch where I'm like, I can't get up. I need coffee. Is it addiction? I don't know. Maybe.
Probably. I always had it super young. So I wouldn't say I don't know if I can claim coffee addiction. because I can go weeks where I'm like, I don't want any coffee at all in my system.
Yeah.
But I don't know, when you're young and
I
just
get it.
having it every day, it's like, am I just becoming so tolerant? Like, am I
Yeah.
building a tolerance to it?
Yeah.
But my breakfast every morning was Cuban coffee or just like a cafe latte, which is just, milk and coffee basically, or espresso and bread.
I didn't eat.
You didn't eat?
I did not eat.
Oh, no.
I didn't eat in the morning. I had coffee and then I went to school. And I was like starving by 12.
That's horrible.
That's horrible. I don't know. It was bad. It was not good. It was not good for health reasons.
I do that now. I do that now where
Yeah,
it's just
but
coffee and a little treat and then lunch.
fasting. It's
true.
okay. It's fasting, which is
true.
okay for you.
So I lived in South Florida, specifically Miami, and I had all the Cuban coffees accessible to me, like café con leche, which is the milk and coffee, cortadito, which is like the espresso coffee, which is just straight up espresso and sugar.
Yeah.
Did you have that available too? I know you were raised a little bit in Miami during middle school and high school. I know I was like 2000s, early 2000s, and you were more like 90s growing up there. So obviously, I think historically it differs a little bit. But yeah, tell me more about that.
I lived in Pembroke Pines, which is in Broward County, so about 45 minutes from Miami. Pembroke Pines was just starting out, kind of. It was like a newer, developing type of town, basically, because I just remember now it's huge.
Oh, yeah.
It's massive. So my parents and I moved from New York to Pembroke Pines, and the culture there during the 90s was more...
Not cubified.
No. It wasn't. It was, my high school was diverse, where I was gradually exposed to different cultures, including Cuban.
In my experience, I was in the era of Miami in South Florida where being Cuban was not like, is more celebrated. I think you were probably in the era of like assimilation and just trying to fit in. So there wasn't as much of the culture integrated into everyday life. But I definitely was raised in the era of like Cuban culture takes over. I was also raised in like Little Havana, which is like the Cuban area, like right on 8th Street in Miami. So I just feel like I just lived in that environment most of my life. So, and Cuban coffee, or just coffee in general, is a huge deal in Cuban culture, just a big part of daily life. You will hear Cuban Miamians be like, I need my cortadito, I need my shot right now of caffeine. And it's just so common to just even have coffee. Like I remember coming home at night and I wouldn't want dinner. And my grandma would be like, well, you want coffee and bread? And I would just eat that for dinner sometimes, which is strange to give a child caffeine right before they go to bed. But it didn't alter me in any, like I didn't stay up shaking or anything like that. So at that point, yes, it's definitely in my blood. But yeah, that's super interesting to see like just a couple years of that difference of cultures and growth and acceptance too, and how quickly it happened. Because that was maybe like what, a couple years, like
10 years.
Yeah, a decade at the most. So super cool. So now that we've talked a little bit about just our upbringing and what we were exposed to with caffeine and things like that, I want to go into the more technical aspect of making coffee, and I want to talk about how to make everything. So I can start off with talking about how I make café con leche. We'll start with café con leche. We could go to cortado, cortadito, and then you can tell me if these drinks they made the same at Starbucks. Well, how does it differ? How to make café con leche at home. First, let's list your ingredients. You will need a percolator or a mocha pot, not necessary but makes the most authentic, espresso coffee of your choice. I use Café Bustelo or Café Pilon, sugar, milk of your choice. Whole milk is what I traditionally use, but you can use whatever milk you'd like. Here's how I make it. Brew espresso coffee in the mocha pot. This step will be used to make a cortadito as well. We'll talk about that in the next section. To brew it, Put water in the bottom chamber. Put the espresso coffee in the bottom chamber above the water. There's a little funnel-shaped cup that will hold it. Place on stove on high heat. Wait for it to brew. While the coffee is brewing, you can boil your milk. Not necessary, but my grandma used to do this to add a little bit more frothiness and freshness to the coffee. Pour milk in cup, and once coffee has completed its brewing, take off heat and pour the espresso in your milk. The amount is up to you. I pour based on the color of the coffee. I tend to like mine on the darker side. Add sugar if you want. Traditionally, add 2 to 3 tablespoons, but I know that is hefty, so you do not have to do that. That's just how I was raised. And I know a lot of Cubans also like a good bit of sugar in there as well. And ta-da! You have a café con leche. Chanel, what is the café con leche equivalent at Starbucks?
I would say it's a cafe latte, which is just espresso from the giant industrial size machines that they have there, and steam milk from the actual steam wand. And sugar is optional, flavor is optional as well.
Now we're going to talk about something that I haven't mentioned, but after doing some research about the difference between cortaditos, cortados, and just espresso shots in general, I found that the actual thing that I make at home isn't a cortadito, it's a colada. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make that and then also the difference. All right, so I want to break down the difference between a colada, a cortadito, and a cortado. So let's start with a colada. So what is a colada coffee? Colada coffee is a Cuban espresso that is sweetened with espuma, which is Spanish for foam, created by mixing brown sugar with the first drops of espresso. So essentially the same kind of steps that I gave you when you're making espresso for your café con leche is the same thing you're going to be doing with a colada. But what you're going to do is you're going to get that brown sugar and you're going to wait for that first drop of coffee to add it to the sugar, and you're going to start blending it and really mixing it up. Sometimes if you have one of those like electronic spinners, it creates a nice, even foamier froth to the coffee. But that is what a colada is. A cortado is a Spanish or Portuguese espresso made from a double shot of espresso and steamed milk. Generally, it's made at a ratio of 50-50, 50% espresso, 50% milk. And then a cortadito, that's a Cuban espresso that consists of a pre-sweetened espresso shot topped off with steamed milk. And that ratio can be 50-50 or sometimes 75 espresso and 25% milk. Now that I've explained the differences between those three drinks, which are pretty similar because they all consist of espresso of some sort, but just different ratios of coffee and how they're created, I wanted to ask Chanel how these drinks differ, or if they're even available at Starbucks, if you have something similar to these drinks that I spoke about, which is the cortadito, cortado, and colada.
For a colada and a cortado, they're basically the same thing for Starbucks. Not in the Cuban culture, but for Starbucks, it's mostly just a shot or 2 shots of espresso from the machine. You can add sugar if you like, and it's steamed milk with a little bit of foam. So it's basically an espresso with foam, technically.
So Starbucks doesn't really make real cortaditos and stuff, essentially. But I didn't expect it to. But definitely if you guys ever visit Miami, and I'm sure there's other places around the world, but off the top of my head, some places that I know that are huge are like La Carreta. Sandwich King is the one I'm mentioning because it was right by on Bird Road by my high school in Miami. In Miami, you can definitely find those authentic, actually made the way I described them drinks, which I feel so fortunate to be a part of. But I know you told me, we were having a conversation, and you did tell me that you had a really cool experience when you worked at a coffee shop in Miami, correct? Mm-hmm. Could you tell me more about that? I think you were like making a cortadito, or here, I'll let you just go ahead and say it.
The first barista job that I had was actually at a privately owned cafe, a small one in one of the malls down in Pembroke Pines. And we didn't even know how to make cortaditos or coladas, but I had an older Cuban gentleman that ordered a cortadito, and I said, I have no idea how to make that. And he said, I will teach you. So he taught me how to make a perfect cortadito with the espresso machine. And every day after that, I would make a perfect cortadito for him. It was really, really sweet. I thought that was awesome, and I loved it. It was delicious. We would drink one together also, which I thought was great. It was a very nice and social gathering for him and I. And it's the same thing going back to my parents, where we would socially drink coffee. Honestly, it's like, you come over, do you want a cup of coffee? Yeah. And then we would just chat about life and everything. And that was the same experience I had with that sweet Cuban man in Miami. And I always think about that.
That's so sweet. And that's honestly, like, I think of tea and crumpets, like in England. Yeah. Excuse my British accent. But yeah, I think about like drinking tea as a social hour. Like, drinking has always been kind of a social thing for humans, eating in general. Mm-hmm. But I know in Miami and Cuban culture, it is huge, like having a coffee. You want to grab some coffee and talk, and I'm sure it's huge in other cultures as well, but that's just how I was raised. So it's cute that you experienced that too. That kind of wraps up everything we wanted to explore. We wanted to talk about how to make the coffee, especially Cuban coffee, and the differences between your experience working at Starbucks and when people request these sort of drinks. I wanted to know if you had any final words for anybody, for all the coffee drinkers out there, or any tips and tricks that you want to share or anything like that.
I do. As much as I appreciate and respect Starbucks, especially teaching me a lot more about coffee than I knew before working there, I do want to say and recommend make your own coffee at home. Whether it's a coffee machine or a percolator or get a fancy schmancy, espresso machine, but make your coffee at home. I guarantee you it's going to be calming, soothing, and it's going to taste a lot better than store-bought, honestly.
And it won't be $7 or like
no,
$10.
You save so much money making your own coffee. It's like $10 to $15 a pound, and that lasts you like a week or two, especially for a coffeeholic like me. It saves money. So I highly recommend it. It will be relaxing, and you will appreciate your coffee making skills once you get used to it.
Thank you. My tip is to drink more espresso. I find, honestly, that sometimes I just want a shot and nothing else. And I feel like people don't take advantage of espresso. And if you get a percolator, y'all, it's easy to make espresso. You do not need a fancy machine. I'm defeating that myth. You do not need a fancy machine to make espresso. You do not need like fancy steaming capabilities. You can just froth it up with like one of those electric spinners. They're like $10 to $15 on Amazon, and get a percolator. I buy mine. My Winn-Dixie next door has it for like $8. The brand is Musa, I'm pretty sure. Musa, I think. It's like orange packaging, but you get it for super cheap. Even cheaper than what's the French press, which is like which I think is weird that it's cheaper than that for some reason. But yes, enjoy more espresso, and I guarantee that, I don't know, to me it's improved my relationship with coffee, where I don't feel like I have to just drink a whole pot. I can just have my little shot of espresso with sugar and get on with my day, and it'll carry me for a good 6 hours. If you guys need caffeine like that, or if you just like the taste, espresso has a wonderful taste. That's my advertisement for espresso, apparently. But I'm just a huge fan. It's a huge part of Cuban and Latin cuisine, but especially Cuban culture. So I want to recommend people drop the Folgers, get some espresso. It's easy. I think it takes less time too sometimes. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I digress. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I am so happy that I was able to be here with Chanel and talk about our experiences and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is what I was raised with and my culture and coffee too. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you learned something new today. Don't hesitate to leave a comment or reach out if you do have any questions about the coffee making process. Chanel, did you want to say goodbye?
Thank you everyone for listening to me and putting up with my ADHD brain, but I really appreciate it. And thank you, Cristyne, for having me as a guest. I appreciate you, sweetheart.
Yay! Thank you guys. And thank you, Professor Song. This has been so fun to do. And I hope to do more podcasts in the future with my friends, just for funsies, honestly. But have a great time, y'all. And hopefully here's another episode in the future.